The sun hung high over the vast stretches of FM 89, just outside Abilene, Texas, casting a relentless glare across the open land. Curtis Delaney, a weathered rancher in his early 50s, wiped the sweat from his brow as he stood in the barn, his hands gripping a wrench tightly. The air was thick with the scent of hay and oil, a familiar comfort that did little to ease the knot of frustration building in his chest. He had been tinkering with an old tractor engine, trying to lose himself in the rhythm of mechanical work, when the sharp, hollow crack echoed across the property like a distant gunshot. Curtis froze, his heart sinking. He didn't need to look to know what it was. The sound had become all too familiar, a cruel punctuation mark in his otherwise quiet life. Dropping the wrench with a clatter, Curtis stepped out of the barn, his boots crunching against the dry earth. The driveway stretched out before him, leading to the road where his mailbox, or what was left of it, now lay crumpled at the edge. The brand new metal box, installed just 2 weeks prior, was folded in half like a discarded piece of paper, its post bent at a grotesque angle, the door flapping open uselessly. In the distance, a white SUV with the HOA patrol markings slowed for a brief moment, its driver glancing back indifferently before accelerating away down the winding road. Curtis rubbed his temples, feeling the familiar throb of anger and exhaustion. This wasn't the first time, nor the second. It was the fifth in less than 6 months, each incident chipping away at his patience and his wallet. At 52, Curtis had built his life on this modest ranch through sheer grit. It wasn't the largest spread in Texas, fenced pastures for a handful of cattle, a simple farmhouse where he lived with his wife Renee and their teenage son Caleb, and this barn where he welded and repaired whatever needed fixing. He had poured his sweat into every inch of this land, turning it into a sanctuary after years in the oil fields. But lately, that sanctuary felt under siege, not from rustlers or drought, but from the very people meant to protect the neighborhood. The HOA patrols, those self-appointed guardians in their gleaming SUV, seemed to have a vendetta against his mailbox, or perhaps against him. Each replacement cost him time and money, digging posts, mounting boxes, painting them to match the rustic aesthetic of the area, only for them to be smashed again by careless bumpers. Muttering curses under his breath, Curtis crossed the yard, dust kicking up around his boots. Across the street, his neighbor Janice Hollowbrook was out walking her dog, a scruffy mutt that tugged at the leash. She stopped when she saw the wreckage, shaking her head in disbelief. Again, Curtis. That's the 5th time now. Curtis nodded, hands planted firmly on his hips, his face etched with lines of frustration. 5th damn time, Janice. They're doing it on purpose, I swear. Nobody hits the same spot over and over unless they're blind or just plain don't give a damn. Janice pulled her hat lower against the blinding sun, her expression sympathetic but wary. Blind or don't care, either way, it's not right. You gonna raise hell at the next meeting. The frustration wasn't isolated to the mailbox. It seeped into every corner of Curtis's life. He felt dismissed, invisible, like his concerns were mere annoyances to the powers that be. At HOA meetings, he'd brought it up before, only to be met with shrugs and smirks. The chairman, Gregory Winslow, would lean back in his chair with that air of false authority, dismissing it as part of living out here. Neighbors shifted uncomfortably, some whispering that Curtis was overreacting, that he should just move the post back a few feet. But it wasn't about the placement, it was about respect, about not being treated like his property was disposable. As the afternoon wore on, Curtis stood at the edge of his property, tape measure in hand, surveying the damage. Cars zipped by on the road, some slowing to gawk at the mangled post. He could imagine the whispers already circulating. There goes Delaney's mailbox again. Why doesn't he just let it go? But letting go wasn't in Curtis's nature. Born in Wichita Falls to a steelworker father, he'd learned early on the value of standing firm. Years in the oil fields had honed that resolve, fighting for every paycheck, every inch of ground. Now, under the scorching Texas sun, sweat trickling down his neck, Curtis made a decision. He was done playing nice. This time, he wouldn't just replace the mailbox, he'd build one that fought back. Back in the barn, Curtis began sketching ideas on a scrap of paper, his mind racing. Steel beams, reinforced concrete, a disguise of cedar planks to make it look ordinary. It would be a fortress hidden in plain sight, anchored deep enough to withstand anything short of a tank. As he worked, memories flooded him. The first hit in late winter, a Friday evening thud as he fed the cattle. The second 2 weeks later, disbelief turning to irritation. The third, when he called the HOA and got nothing but empty promises. By the fourth, he'd confronted Winslow at a meeting only to be brushed off. Accidents happen, Winslow had said, his voice dripping with condescension. Neighbors shuffled, avoiding Curtis's gaze, as if his persistence made him the problem. The pattern was undeniable. His mailbox gleamed new until it was targeted, while others nearby stood untouched, weathered but intact. Was it deliberate? Retaliation for past clashes, like the fence rule he'd challenged and won? Sherman Hayes, an older neighbor, had suggested as much in the grocery store aisles. Not paranoid if it's true, he'd whispered. Curtis replayed those moments, the dismissive tones, the feeling of being silenced. It fueled him now, turning frustration into determination. As the sun dipped lower, casting long shadows across the ranch, Renee called him in for dinner. She was a steady presence, her calm demeanor a counter to his fire. At the table, she tried to soothe him. Maybe put it closer to the house, Curtis. That way they can't reach it. He shook his head, fork paused midair. That's not the point, Renee. They'll find a way no matter what, and I'll be damned if I let them push me around. Caleb, leaning forward with youthful curiosity, asked, "You think they're targeting you, Dad?" Curtis paused, unsure if it was harassment or recklessness, but the disrespect stung either way. "They don't respect me," he said finally, "and I'm tired of paying for their mistakes." After dinner, Curtis returned to the barn, flipping on the lights. The community center meeting from weeks ago replayed in his mind. The stale smell of carpet and coffee, Winslow's tailored coat, the way he'd smirked. Curtis had stood, voice steady. "Fifth mailbox this year. Why do the patrols keep destroying my property?" Murmurs rippled through the crowd, but Winslow dismissed it. "Accidents happen. Move it back." Even when Sherman backed him, the board brushed it off. That sting propelled Curtis now as he gathered materials, steel plates, rebar, bolts. This wasn't just a repair, it was a statement. Neighbors' whispers followed him into the evening. At the feed store, he'd overheard, "Curtis always has a temper." At the gas station, "He's picking fights." Edith Rowland, the nosy neighbor, had stopped by earlier, leaning on the barn door. "Folks say you're stirring the pot." "It's just a mailbox." Curtis met her eyes. "It's about respect. If it was your porch, you wouldn't let it go." She muttered and left, but the words lingered. As night fell, Curtis sat on the porch with Renee, cicadas chirping. "You're not sleeping," she said softly. He admitted, "I keep thinking, what if it's payback for the fence fight?" Renee squeezed his hand. "You belong here." But the pressure mounted. Overhearing at the hardware store, Delaney's blaming the patrols, always looking for a fight. Caleb mentioned school rumors of a lawsuit. Curtis denied it. "Suing costs money." "No, I'm building something they can't break." Renee worried, "What if it makes things worse?" Curtis replied, "They're already against me. At least this way it's on my terms." Sherman visited, eyeing the steel, bold, but Winslow won't like it. "Curtis, it's a boundary, not a trap." The tension built, sides forming, some admiring his stubbornness, others calling him dangerous. But Curtis pressed on, welding late into the night, sparks flying like defiant stars. By midnight the frame was taking shape. Curtis stepped back, envisioning the finished product. This mailbox would end the assaults, but he knew it might spark something bigger. For now, in the quiet of one long day, he focused on reclaiming his ground. The first light of dawn crept over the horizon, painting the Texas sky in hues of pink and gold. Curtis Delaney rose early, as always, the events of the previous afternoon still fresh in his mind like an open wound. The crumpled mailbox lay where it had fallen, a stark reminder of the disrespect that had plagued him. But today was different. Today, he would build his response. Coffee in hand, he headed to the barn, the air crisp with morning dew. Renee stirred in the kitchen, preparing breakfast, her worried glances following him out the door. Caleb, still asleep, would wake to the sounds of creation or confrontation. Curtis flipped on the barn lights, the hum of electricity joining the distant lowing of cattle. Materials scattered across the workbench, steel beams salvaged from old rig parts, rebar for reinforcement, cedar planks for camouflage. He donned his gloves and welding mask, the torch igniting with a whoosh. Sparks danced as he fused the skeleton, each weld a declaration of defiance. This wasn't hasty work, it was meticulous, born from months of pent-up rage now funneled into one day's labor. As the sun climbed, neighbors began their routines, some glancing curiously at the activity. Janice Hollowbrook passed by on her morning walk, dog in tow. "Still at it, Curtis. That thing looks like it's gonna be a beast." He lifted his mask, wiping sweat. "Got a B, Janice. Tired of replacing him." She nodded, understanding the undercurrent. Inside, Renee brought him water. "Don't overdo it." But Curtis was driven, memories fueling him, the dismissive HOA meetings, Winslow's smirks, the pattern of destruction that felt personal. By mid-morning, the frame was solid. Curtis dug the trench at the roadside, shovel biting into the earth. Sweat soaked his shirt as he mixed concrete, pouring it in layers around the rebar. Anchored post. Cars slowed, drivers staring. Edith Rowland strolled up, arms crossed. "New mailbox again. You'll get sued if someone gets hurt." Curtis paused. "What if, Edith, I've been hurt? In the wallet 5 times. Where was your worry then?" She huffed and left, but the encounter steeled him. Sherman Hayes arrived with coffee, leaning on his cane. "Looks sturdy. Folks'll call you a genius or fool." Curtis grinned. "Maybe both." They talked of past clashes, the fence rule victory that irked Winslow. "This is payback," Sherman said. Curtis agreed but focused on the build. Caleb joined. "Why?" "Died. Like a tank, Dad." "Close enough." Curtis replied, teaching him welds. As noon approached, the post set. Curtis clad it in cedar, sanding and staining. It looked rustic, harmless, a perfect disguise. Renee watched from the porch. "I hope this brings peace." "Curtis, peace comes when they can't push anymore." Rumors swirled. At the diner, folks debated, booby trap or smart. Back home, a patrol SUV lingered, driver staring. Curtis stared back. "Keep off my property." The installation complete by afternoon, Curtis admired it. Neighbors gathered subtly. Then, the thud. A patrol SUV clipped it, crumpling its hood while the mailbox stood unscathed. The driver stumbled out, dazed. "What the hell?" "Curtis, a mailbox." Janice arrived. "It didn't even move." Sherman chuckled. "Fortress." Edith, reckless. Gregory Winslow showed up, jaw tight. "Hazard." Curtis countered. "Your patrols destroyed 5 of mine. Now you care." The crowd split, some supportive, others wary. Renee stood by him. "Fair's fair." Caleb whispered. "Legendary." Gregory threatened. "This isn't over." As evening fell, the crash's aftermath lingered, tensions rising in whispered debates. Twilight enveloped the ranch as the echoes of the crash faded, but the air buzzed with unrest. Curtis Delaney stood by his indestructible mailbox, the cedar gleaming under the fading sun, a symbol of his unyielding resolve. The wrecked SUV was towed away, leaving debris as evidence. Neighbors dispersed, but whispers carried on the wind. Renee pulled him inside. "They're suing Curtis." Note came today. He read the legal jargon, violations, hazards. Caleb, garbage. Sherman visited, fight it. Maxine Porter, the attorney, arrived promptly, reviewing. "They're reaching, we can win." Costs loomed, but Curtis, "I won't back down." Social fallout intensified, waves from supporters, avoidance from others. Patrols intimidated, notes threatened. At a hasty meeting, Gregory condemned. Unsafe. Curtis defended. "My land." Room erupted. Sherman backed him. By night, the suit dropped amid community pushback. On the porch, family toasted to standing ground. The mailbox stood as a monument, peace restored in one tumultuous day. Curtis reflected, worth it for dignity earned.
If you liked this story, please like, subscribe, and share it with others so they can learn something from it too.